The fire is dying. You can hear it in the way the flames whisper against the logs. See it in how the shadows creep closer to your boots. Outside, the wind cuts through the cabin walls like they're made of paper. Frost has formed on the inside of the windows. Delicate crystals that catch the firelight and throw it back at you in fragments. You check your watch. 3 hours until dawn. The wood pile is down to kindling. There's a choice here, isn't there? Stay warm and burn through your fuel, or let the cold seep in and save what little you have left. Either way, you're borrowing time. Either way, the mathematics of survival are working against you. You step outside. The wind hits like a physical thing, driving snow into your face until the world becomes nothing but white noise and numbness. Your breath turns to ice before it leaves your mouth. In the distance, something howls. Low and hungry and patient. No monsters here, no final boss waiting in some castle made of bone. Just hunger, just cold. Just the patient, inexorable tick of a clock that only counts down. This is not a game about winning. This is about how long you can hold out before the cold takes you. Welcome to the Long Dark, and before we go any further, yes, there's a story mode. Wintermute, they call it. Will Mackenzie and Dr. Astrid Greenwood crashed in the wilderness after a geomagnetic disaster that killed every electronic device on the continent. Characters with names and voices, cutscenes, plot threads that weave together across 4 episodes like the kind of narrative you'd expect from any other game. Episodes that take you through Milton's abandoned streets, across Mystery Lake's frozen expanse, into Pleasant Valley's killing winds. A mystery case, a missing ex-wife, the slow unraveling of what really happened when the lights went out forever. If you want to experience that blind, you still can. I'm not here to spoil it. I'm here for what The Long Dark does when it strips all of that away. When the voices stop and the objectives disappear and the quest markers fade to black. When there's no rescue mission to complete, no mystery to solve, no reunion waiting at the end of some predetermined path. When there's nothing left but you, the cold, and the simple question of how many more sunrises you can steal from a world that doesn't care if you see them. Because the real story of The Long Dark isn't written in dialogue trees or cutscenes. It's written in the slow accumulation of small defeats. In frostbite creeping up your fingers while you try to start a fire with matches that won't light. In the way food spoils faster than you can find it. How tools break just when you need them most. In the mathematics of a world where every calorie burned is borrowed from a finite amount. And the interest rate is always working against you. This is about survival mode, about what happens when the game drops you into Great Bear Island's 16 regions of frozen wilderness, from the beginner-friendly shores of Mystery Lake to the wolf-haunted peaks of Timberwolf Mountain, with nothing but the clothes on your back and a simple premise. See how long you last. Limited skill trees to unlock, no permanent upgrades to chase, no progression beyond learning which mistakes will kill you fastest. About learning that in a world where the Aurora has broken the laws of physics, twisted the behavior of every living thing, and left the night sky painted in sick greens and blues, the only law that still applies is entropy. Heat flows from warm places to cold ones until everything reaches equilibrium. Bodies burn calories faster than they can replace them. Metal fatigues. Cloth wears thin. Wood burns to ash. Everything breaks down, everything runs out, and everything ends. The only question is how long you can make it last before the cold writes your name in the snow and moves on without you. Or something like that anyway. But before we, get into the video, make sure to smash that like button like you're breaking ice for fishing and subscribe or I'll feed you to the wolves. Literally. And if you want to watch me freeze to death in real time whilst making increasingly poor decisions, I'm streaming this on Twitch. If you're watching when this drops, I'm probably live right now getting mauled by a bear because I thought I could outrun it. His name was David, though like most things about the time before, that stopped mattering pretty quickly. He woke up in a house in Milton, Mountain Town the Science called it, though there wasn't much town left to speak of. Just empty houses with frost on the inside of their windows and cars buried under snow, like metal tombstones. The Aurora had painted the sky in sick greens the night the world ended, and now everything electronic was dead, and the cold was moving in to reclaim what remained. Day one felt almost like camping. He ransacked the house methodically. Books, magazines, canned food, anything that might be useful. 2 stories of abandoned lives. A fireplace downstairs that still worked. A kitchen with cupboards full of promises, a bedroom upstairs where he could pretend this was temporary. He found a bedroll in his pack like the game had taken pity on him, gave him one small mercy to start with. He moved on to the credit union after stepping outside of the house, digging through the bones of a civilization that had died overnight, looking for anything useful in the aftermath. The safe in the back office taunted him with its combination lock, 3 tumblers between him and whatever treasures some long-dead banker had thought worth protecting. He worked at it methodically, listening for the clicks that meant progress, overshooting the 3rd tumbler twice before finally hearing that satisfying mechanical surrender. He got some cash that would never buy anything again, maple syrup that might keep him alive another day, and a singular .303 rifle cartridge. 1 bullet's worth of hope in a world that had run out of both, but honestly wouldn't be that much use because it a rifle. As the sun began to set on his first day in hell, he explored deeper into Milton's frozen corpse. Cars trapped under snow like insects in amber, their windows dark and useless. He checked them anyway, hoping for something, anything, that might tip the odds in his favor. Found nothing but the hollow disappointment of raised hopes meeting cold reality. Another house beckoned, and with darkness coming fast, he claimed it as his temporary base of operations. The potbelly stove fought him at first. Matches that wouldn't catch, kindling too cold to ignite. The kind of basic failure that could kill you if you let it snowball. But, get it. But eventually the fire took hold and transformed the house from tomb to temporary home, filled the space with light and warmth and the illusion of safety. He used a torch pulled from the flames to explore the rest of his new domain, moving through rooms where other people had once lived their ordinary lives. He found clothes that might fit and supplies that might matter, but also the smaller details that made it real. Family photos on mantelpieces, children's drawings still stuck to refrigerators, coffee mugs sitting unwashed in sinks like their owners had just stepped out for a moment. But it was when he stepped back outside that the world showed him its true face. The aurora had returned, but this time he was watching. It painted the sky in colors that had no names, turned the familiar constellations into something alien and wrong, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The very thing that had killed every electronic device on the planet, turned cars into sculptures and phones into paperweights. He stood there in the snow watching his civilization's murder weapon dance across the heavens, and for a moment, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Day 2 brought confidence that would prove nearly fatal. He took the road to the right of his shelter, following it like he was on a sightseeing tour instead of fighting for his life, past fenced areas where someone had once cared about property lines, through once felled trees that show civilization used to exist here. A wooden arch stood over the road like a gateway to nowhere, marking the boundary between the town's illusion of civilization and the raw wilderness beyond. A gas station stood locked and useless. He had no pry bar yet, no way to break in, so he moved on like he had all the time in the world. The road led to a collapsed section where a prison bus had met its final stop, half buried under snow and debris. The irony wasn't lost on him. Prisoners and guards alike, all equal now under the indifferent weight of winter. Whatever crimes had landed those inmates behind bars suddenly seemed quaint compared to the crime of being human in a world that had stopped caring about human concerns. With nowhere else to go, he headed off the beaten path, up into the hills where the real wilderness waited. That's when his inexperience almost killed him the first time. The cold hit like a physical blow, dropping his body temperature faster than his amateur fire-starting skills could compensate for. His character seemed to have the heat retention of an ice cube, losing warmth at a rate that defied any reasonable understanding of thermodynamics. He built a campfire with shaking hands, huddled around it like a primitive ancestor worshipping flame, and learned his first hard lesson about Great Bear Island. The cold doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care about your learning curve or your good intentions. It just takes what it wants when it wants it. But the view from up there. Christ, the view was worth dying for. A whole valley spread out below like a promise written in white ink. Untouched wilderness stretching to horizons he couldn't even imagine. The wanderlust hit him then. That stupid human need to see what's over the next hill. To claim territory with your eyes, even when you can barely survive where you're standing. The moose found him whilst he was playing explorer. He heard the warning first, that low, primal sound that every mammal recognizes as run or die. But David was still thinking like a civilized human, still believed that being apex predator meant something in a world that had stopped caring about the food chain. The moose emerged from the tree line like something out of a nature documentary. Except this time, the camera wasn't safely hidden behind bulletproof glass. It charged before his brain could process the threat. 1,000 pounds of muscle and antler moved like a freight train with a personal grudge. David had maybe 2 seconds to understand that he'd made a terrible mistake, that his confidence had outpaced his competence by a fatal margin. The impact broke his ribs and his illusions in equal measure, snapped bone like kindling, and left him gasping on his back in the snow whilst the moose stood over him, breath steaming, deciding whether he was worth finishing off. When it finally wandered away, bored with his suffering, he crawled towards what looked like shelter, leaving a trail of blood and desperation in the snow behind him. The ranger station was tucked into the hillside like a secret, a small building that should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like a preview of coming attractions. A bedroll was spread next to a frozen corpse. His first real introduction to how this story would end. Someone else had made it this far, had the same gear, the same hopes, the same stubborn refusal to accept reality. And they died anyway. Become a cautionary tale for the next fool who thought that they could conquer the wilderness. But even with his ribs screaming and his breath coming in short gasps, David was young and stupid and convinced he was different. He's tended to his wounds there next to the corpse, slapping bandages over the moose's handiwork, downing painkillers like candy to dull the fire in his chest. 5 days to heal, the game informed him with clinical precision. 120 hours of reduced mobility. No climbing, moving like an old man through a world that demanded Olympic-level endurance just to see another sunrise. He spent the night huddled next to the frozen body, sharing space with his future self, while he tried to get a fire going with hands that shook from pain and shock. Continuing on, he found a picnic area with benches and abandoned sodas, the kind of place where families had once come to enjoy nature in manageable, sanitized doses. Now it was just another monument to human hubris. Proof that people had once believed they could survive this. After this, he found time to notice the mountaineering rope attached to the cliff face outside, coiling it up like he was planning expeditions instead of currently dying in a shack next to someone who'd had the exact same plans. That rope felt like possibility, like freedom, like the key to exploring all that beautiful wilderness spread out below, once he could move without wanting to scream. On the way back to town, he threw a rock at the moose when he passed it on the way back. A gesture of defiance that felt important at the time, but changed nothing about the fundamental mathematics of survival. The moose looked at him with the kind of patient contempt reserved for creatures too stupid to learn from their mistakes. Day 3 brought the kind of mistake that should have killed him. He left his boots and socks behind, just walked out into sub-zero weather in his bare feet like some kind of hypothermic sleepwalker, also because I'm stupid. The thought process, such as it was, involved checking out another path from town. Maybe finding that farm he'd glimpsed in the distance, only to notice his error when the frostbite warning started flashing and his toes began turning colors that toes probably shouldn't be. The dash back to warmth felt like running on broken glass. Each step a reminder that the cold doesn't care about your attention span or your ability to remember basic human needs. He made it back, barely, and spent an hour thawing out extremities while calling himself every kind of idiot. He added more layers, wrapped himself in everything he could find, and learned another hard lesson about the difference between surviving and almost dying. But he ended up surviving that too somehow. Started exploring more systematically, hitting every house in Milton like he was conducting a census of the apocalypse. He found a pry bar, that holy grail of entry tools that would let him access locked areas. He found a hatchet at a logging site, its blade still sharp enough to split wood or split skulls, depending on what the day demanded. In the attic of one house, he found something that stopped him cold. An empty crib surrounded by toys. Evidence of a life that had barely started before the world ended. The eco-apocalypse, as he'd started thinking of it, had claimed even the smallest and most innocent victims. Somewhere out there, probably buried under snow, was a baby who would never grow up to make their own mistakes. And then his ribs finally healed, and the wanderlust came back stronger than ever. The pain was gone, his mobility restored, and that mountaineering rope was calling to him from where he'd stashed it. He rappelled down that cliff like he was conquering new territory instead of stumbling deeper into a death trap. Descended into the basin below where Mystery Lake stretched out like a frozen promise. The transit to Forlorn Muskeg felt like progress, like he was finally getting somewhere. He'd survived his first encounter with the wildlife, however barely, learned to respect the cold, figured out the basics of fire starting and food management. Maybe he was tougher than he thought. Maybe he was learning fast enough to stay ahead of the curve. Forlorn Muskeg would prove to be his undoing. A maze of frozen waterways and railroad tracks that looked navigable on paper, but felt like walking through a minefield. The rail line stretched through the center of the map like a promise of safe passage, but everything around it was weak ice, and the kind of terrain that killed you slowly. Hypothermia by degrees. The first wolf came out of the winter forest like a grey nightmare. David saw it just before it hit him. Yellow eyes and bared teeth, and the kind of predatory focus that turns humans back into prey animals. It knocked him down, tore chunks out of his arm with surgical precision, then vanished back into the brush like it had never been there at all. The attack left him dazed and confused, blood soaking through his jacket while his brain tried to process what just happened. The pain came after the shock, waves of it, that made thinking difficult and moving dangerous. But the wolf was gone and he was still alive, and that had to count for something. But panic made him stupid. He popped an emergency stim and ran for the railway, thinking distance would save him, not understanding that the stims were a trap disguised as salvation. They flooded his system with artificial energy, made him feel superhuman for about 10 minutes, then crashed his fatigue to nothing. Suddenly he was stumbling across the ice like a drunk, burning through his remaining strength at double speed, while the world closed in around him. The second wolf found him like that, exhausted, disoriented, barely able to stay upright on ice that seemed determined to kill him. This one was different, more patient, stalking him across the frozen landscape, like it understood that time was on its side. David used his last stim to get away, ran blindly across the frozen lake until the inevitable happened, and the ice gave way beneath his feet. The water was so cold, it felt like fire. Like electricity, like every nerve in his body screaming at once. The shock of it drove the air from his lungs and filled his boots with liquid death. He hauled himself out through pure animal instinct, but hypothermia was setting in fast. That bone-deep cold that makes your thoughts move like molasses and turns simple tasks into monumental challenges. He fell through again and again. Each time the ice broke a little easier. The water claimed a little more of his body heat. His clothes grew heavier with the weight of frozen water. By the time he found solid ground, he was so cold he could barely think, his core temperature dropping towards the point where his body would simply stop trying to keep him alive. He built a snow shelter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, muscle memory from 4 days of practice overriding the part of his brain that wanted to lie down and give up. He got a fire going through pure stubbornness, and the kind of desperate competence that comes when death is watching over your shoulder. The flames felt like a miracle, like grace made manifest in the form of burning wood. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he might actually pull through this. He'd survived 2 wolf attacks, fallen through ice multiple times, built emergency shelter in conditions that would have killed him a week ago. Maybe he was tougher than he thought. Maybe he was learning fast enough to stay ahead of the curve. Maybe those ribs breaking had taught him something about respecting the wilderness that would keep him alive. He spent hours in that shelter, feeding sticks to the fire and trying to get warm enough to think clearly. His clothes were soaked through, his energy reserves completely shot. But he was alive, and the fire was holding, and maybe that would be enough. Just as he started to believe he might still find a way out of this mess, he decided to leave the shelter and explore further on. That's when the bear found him. It came at him like something from a fever dream. Black fur and small intelligent eyes, and the kind of casual menace that comes from being the undisputed king of a world without rules. David tried to run, but his body had nothing left to give. The stims had burned through his reserves, the cold had sapped his strength, and 6 days of amateur hour survival had left him running on fumes and false hope. The bear caught him in 3 strides, knocked him down like he was made of paper, opened him up with claws that were built for exactly this purpose. David felt his ribs break again, the same ones that had just healed. Felt warm blood soaking through layers of clothing that were supposed to keep him alive. The mauling felt both eternal and instantaneous. Time stretched and compressed, while the bear demonstrated exactly where humans ranked in the food chain when civilization wasn't there to protect them. When it was over, David lay in the snow watching his blood melt patterns in the ice, trying to catalog which parts of his body still responded to his brain's increasingly desperate commands. He crawled away afterwards, somehow, trailing blood across the snow while his vision tunneled, and his breathing came in shorter and shorter gasps. He managed to get some sort of distance away from the bear, before curling up like a wounded animal, which is exactly what he was. The cold was winning now, moving into claimed territory the bear had softened up for it. His thoughts grew fuzzy, disconnected, like a radio signal fading in and out. He tried to remember why he'd come here, what he hoped to accomplish, but the answers felt like they'd belonged to someone else's life. There was supposed to be a plan, wasn't there? Some reason for all this suffering? The cold took him slowly, the way it always does. No drama, no final words, no moment of clarity where everything made sense. Just the gradual shutdown of systems that had been running on borrowed time since that first night in Milton. His body temperature dropped degree by degree until everything that made him David stopped working, and he became just another frozen shape in the landscape. 6 days. That's how long he lasted. 6 days of small victories and incremental defeats. Of plans that reality laughed at before moving on. He'd mapped part of 3 regions, learned to start fires in impossible conditions, survived encounters with 3 different kinds of predators, figured out how to work a combination safe and rappel down a cliff face. For a brief moment, he'd even felt competent. None of it mattered in the end. The cold didn't care about his courage or his learning curve or the careful notes he would have written in his journal if he'd fought to bring one. The cold just waited, patient as geology, until David ran out of ways to keep it at bay. They didn't find his body because nobody was looking for it. It's still out there somewhere in forlorn Muskeg, buried under snow that will never melt, feeding the ecosystem that killed him with nutrients that once answered to the name David, and had opinions about the weather, and dreams about making it to spring. There was no end goal here, no rescue mission, no final objective that would make it all worthwhile. Just 6 days bought with small sacrifices and stubborn refusal to quit, and the quiet that came after. The first thing you learn in the Long Dark is that you are not the protagonist. You're not the chosen one, the last hope, the hero destined to save the world. You're just meat, with a body temperature of 37 degrees, wandering around in a world that's decided it prefers everything at minus 36. The cold doesn't care that you have a backstory. It doesn't care about your hopes, your dreams, your clever survival strategies, or the touching speech you rehearsed about making it home to your family. The cold is not your enemy. Enemies have motivations, weaknesses, patterns you can learn and exploit. The cold is just physics. Thermodynamics, the inexorable movement of heat from warm places to cold ones, until everything reaches the same temperature. And that temperature is normally death. This is what the Long Dark understands that most survival games miss entirely. In Rust, you gather scrap until you're the apex predator. In Minecraft, you punch trees until you've built a castle. In Subnautica, you craft better gear until the ocean bends to your will. Most survival games are power fantasies wearing the mask of hardship. They let you feel vulnerable for just long enough to make victory taste sweeter. The Long Dark has no victory screen. At least, not in survival. No final boss, no moment where you stand triumphant over a conquered wilderness. You don't graduate from vulnerable to powerful. You start cold, and you end colder. Every system in the game is designed around entropy. Your clothes wear out, your tools break beyond repair. Food spoils in your backpack while you sleep. The rifle you find might jam at the worst possible moment. Even your hard-won survival skills. Learning to start fires faster, to harvest more meat from a carcass, to shoot straighter. These aren't upgrades so much as delayed sentences. You're not getting stronger, you're just learning how to die more efficiently. The weather doesn't check your skill level before deciding to kill you. A blizzard will blind you and drop the temperature to killing levels whether you're on day 1 or day 100. The wolves don't care that you've survived this long, they're just hungry, and you're made of meat. The aurora that paints the sky in sick greens might look beautiful, but it turns every predator on the island into something more dangerous, more aggressive, and more likely to tear you apart just because it can. You are not the center of this world, you're not even a footnote. You're an uninvited guest at a party that started long before you arrived and will continue long after you're gone. Great Bear Island was here before the geomagnetic disaster, before the planes stopped flying, before you washed up on its shores with nothing but hypothermia and false hope. It will be here when your bones are buried under 10 feet of snow and spring never comes. The game doesn't hate you. Hatred would imply intent, emotion, some kind of personal investment in your suffering. The cold is infinitely worse than hatred. It's indifference. You can fight an enemy. You can't fight the law of conservation of energy. And yet somehow, this indifference is what makes every small victory feel miraculous. When you manage to start a fire with your last match while a blizzard howls outside, it's not because you conquered nature. It's because you managed to steal a few more hours from the inevitable. When you take down a deer with a perfectly placed shot, you haven't mastered the hunt, you've just postponed starvation by another week. The cold doesn't care about your story. But maybe that's exactly why your story matters. Because in a world that treats your life as a rounding error, every day you refuse to die is an act of defiance. Every fire you light is a middle finger to entropy. Every dawn you see is proof that even indifferent physics can't quite snuff out the stubborn, inexplicable thing that makes you keep trying. You're not the hero, you're not even particularly important, but you're here, and you're alive, and for now, for this moment, that's enough. There's a moment, usually somewhere around day 30, when you start to understand the real enemy. It's not the wolves, though they'll tear your throat out if you give them the chance. It's not the cold, though it seeps into your bones like a living thing with teeth. It's not even the hunger that gnaws at your stomach while you sleep, or the fatigue that makes every step feel like walking through quicksand. It's time. Time is what spoils the meat you spent hours hunting. Time is what wears holes in the clothes you've carefully mended a dozen times already. Time is what drains the batteries in your flashlight, rusts the metal in your tools, and slowly, inevitably, turns every victory into just another item on the list of things you'll have to do again tomorrow. The Long Dark operates on a simple principle that most games try to hide from you. Everything is temporary. Every resource is finite. Every solution creates a new problem. Every day you survive is a day closer to the day you don't. Other games let you build something lasting. In Minecraft, your castle will stand forever unless you actively destroy it. In Subnautica, your base becomes a permanent fixture, a safe harbor you can always return to. Even in more punishing survival games, there's usually some sense of permanence. A foundation you can build on, a core you can expand from. The Long Dark offers no such comfort. There's no real building, no permanent construction. The only way to impose your will is moving stuff around in any building, but even that isn't really permanent. You're a visitor here, and not a welcome one. The best you can do is temporarily rearrange existing resources before entropy reclaims them. Your clothes wear out faster than you can repair them. Each mending uses precious cloth that could be used for something else. And even successfully repaired items lose a little of their maximum condition each time. Eventually, even your most cherished jacket, the one that saved your life in 3 different blizzards, becomes trash. You'll wear it until it literally falls apart on your body. Then strip the cloth from its corpse to patch something else that's falling apart. Your tools have the same terminal diagnosis. That hacksaw you found, the one that felt like winning the lottery. It has maybe 20 uses left in it before the blade gets too dull to cut anything thicker than hope. You can find a whetstone and extend its life, but whetstones are rare and each sharpening gives you diminishing returns. Eventually the hacksaw joins the growing pile of broken metal that used to be useful. Even food, the most basic requirement for staying alive, is a race against time. Raw meat spoils in days, cooked meat lasts longer, but not long enough. You can slow the process by keeping food outside in the cold, but then you risk losing it to wildlife or having it freeze solid when the temperature drops too far. The cattail stalks you harvested, they'll rot. The fish you caught, they'll spoil. The precious can of peaches you've been saving for an emergency, the metal will eventually fail and the contents will turn to poison. The game tracks all of this decay with obsessive precision. Every item has a condition percentage that slowly ticks downward like a countdown timer. Your jacket, 67%. Your boots, 43%. Your rifle, 82%. but dropping every time you fire it, and there's only so much a cleaning kit can do before the barrel warps beyond repair. And then there's your body, the most finite resource of all. Calories burn whether you're active or resting. Your character needs roughly 2,000 calories a day just to maintain basic functions, more if you're working hard or fighting off the cold. Find a deer and you might get 10 kilograms of meat. About 12,000 calories if you're efficient with the harvest. Seems like a lot until you do the math. That's 6 days of food, assuming you can cook and preserve all of it before it spoils. Assuming nothing else eats it first. Assuming you don't waste any fuel cooking it. Assuming you don't burn extra calories hauling it back to the shelter, or burn the meal altogether. 6 days, 1 deer. And deer don't exactly line up to be shot. And the world itself is dying around you. On higher difficulties, animals become scarcer over time. The few deer that survived your hunting learn to avoid your usual routes. Rabbits disappear from overstressed groves. Even the fish grow sparse in over-leveraged lakes. You're not just running out of supplies, you're running out of things to make supplies from. There are no respawns, no second chances, like no reloading from a save when things go wrong. Except you can, but you get like a permanent debuff when fucking down. Every mistake compounds, every injury lingers, every resource consumed is gone forever from that world, that life, that particular iteration of your slow-motion disaster. This is the Long Dark's deepest truth. You're not fighting for victory, you're fighting for time. Every day survived is a victory, but it's also a resource spent. Every challenge overcome is proof that you're still alive, but also proof that you're one day closer to the challenge that will finally break you. The game never tells you this directly, it doesn't need to. You figure it out on your own, usually sometime around day 30, when you're standing in a cabin you've called home for weeks, looking at your dwindling supplies and your deteriorating equipment and your hand-drawn map, marked with all the places you've already stripped bare. You realize with this kind of clarity that comes only in moments of perfect despair, that this isn't sustainable, that there is no sustainable, that the only reason you're still alive is because you haven't been dead long enough yet. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to win. Maybe it's to see how gracefully you can lose, how long you can hold the line against entropy, how many days you can steal from inevitability before time collects what it's owed. The clock is always ticking. The question is whether you'll hear it as a countdown or as the rhythm of a life lived, one heartbeat at a time. You die on day 47. Not with drama or fanfare, not fighting off a pack of wolves or caught in some spectacular blizzard. You die quietly, curled up in a sleeping bag in a cabin you've called home for 2 weeks, while outside the wind whispers against walls that have sheltered a dozen other desperate souls who came before you. The hypothermia takes you slowly. You've been fighting it for hours, feeding sticks to a dying fire with hands too numb to feel the splinters. Your body temperature has been dropping for days. First the extremities, then the core, the slow shutdown of systems that have been running on borrowed time since that first night you stumbled out of the wreckage of your old life. There's no rescue coming, no last-minute salvation, no final boss to defeat or puzzle to solve that will make everything right. Just the patient mathematics of a body that burns calories faster than it can find them, in a world that measures heat in degrees below zero. You had plans, didn't you? Routes to explore, caches to establish, a grand strategy for making it through winter to some impossible spring. You mapped the island like you owned it, marked safe houses like promises, told yourself stories about the self-sufficient survivor you were becoming. All those plans are still there, written in your journal in handwriting that grew shakier as the days passed. Tomorrow you were going to check the snares by Rabbit Grove. Next week you were going to explore the coast for beachcomb supplies. You had it all figured out, right up until the moment your body decided it was done figuring things out. The cabin will be here when spring comes, if spring comes. Your supplies, what's left of them anyway, will sit on their shelves like an inheritance for the next poor bastard who comes stumbling through that door. They'll find your journal and read your careful notes about hunting patterns and weather cycles, and the best places to find birch bark for kindling. They'll think you knew what you were doing. They'll be wrong, but they won't live long enough to figure that out. This is what the Long Dark has been trying to tell you all along. Not through dialogue or cutscenes or heavy-handed metaphors, but through the slow accumulation of small defeats that add up to something larger than yourself. Every fire that burned down to embers, every tool that broke beyond repair, every plan that reality laughed at before moving on. You're not the hero of this story. You're not even particularly important. You're just another name the cold will learn and forget. Another set of bones that will disappear under the snow until even the bones become part of the landscape. But for 47 days, you refused to die quietly. You lit fires in impossible conditions. You hunted when hunting seemed hopeless. You mended clothes with frozen fingers and cooked meals with spoiled meat and told yourself stories about tomorrow when today felt unbearable. For 47 days, you were alive in a world designed to kill you. You felt the satisfaction of a perfectly placed shot, the relief of finding shelter just as the blizzard hit, the simple animal pleasure of warm food in a warm place while the wind howled outside like something that wanted in. You experienced beauty too, didn't you? The way the aurora painted the sky in impossible colors, the crystalline silence of a forest after fresh snowfall, the moment when you crested a hill and saw the whole of Great Bear Island spread out below you, like a promise written in white ink on blue paper. These moments don't mean anything in the grand scheme. They won't be remembered or recorded or passed down to anyone who might care. But they were yours. For the brief time they existed, they belonged to you completely, the way nothing else in your life ever has. That's what The Long Dark offers, and it's more than most games dare give you. Not the fantasy of winning, but the reality of losing beautifully. Not the promise that your struggles will lead somewhere meaningful, but the assurance that struggling itself can be meaning enough. The cold doesn't care about your story, but your story exists anyway. The world doesn't remember your 47 days, but those days happened. You happened. And for one brief, impossible moment in the vast indifference of the universe, you made fire from nothing and called it home. The game ends, but not really. You'll start again, a different character in a different place with different challenges and the same inevitable end. You'll die again and again and again. Each time learning something new about grace under pressure, about the weight of small decisions, about how much meaning you can squeeze from borrowed time. The Long Dark doesn't care if you win, because winning was never the point. It only asks one thing. How will you spend the time between now and when you freeze? Maybe that's enough. Maybe the answer isn't in lasting forever, but in making each borrowed day worth the price you paid for it. In proving that even in a world where nothing lasts, some things are worth doing anyway. The fire always burns out, but whilst it burns, it's beautiful. Okay, well, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. I mean, you stuck around for this long, you might as well. Make sure to check out my Twitch stream if you're watching this when it goes live. And as always, I'd like to thank the channel members and the Patreons. That, of course, being The Milkman, Flapjack, Camo Chameleon, Will Provine, Reese Lunn, Aroxano, Vinicus Franca, A Brick Wall, Ice Bear, Ash Crowing, Adrian Nerium, Ice Bear, Crit Croc, My Hara Project, and Proxy. Thank you all so much for the support. It truly means the world, and I do hope that everyone enjoyed today's video. Very similar to the videos I've been doing recently, but I like survival game, so don't care. Thumbs up. That's about everything I have to say. Thank you all so much for watching. Times 3. It's like 2 in the morning. It's like 3 in the morning. I want to go to bed. So, night. Make sure to check back in. I might have another video out on Friday on the new No I'm Not a Human demo because, you know, did a video on that ages ago. Kind of banged. See how it goes. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Peace. Night. Love you. XOXO.